coming up. Did you grow up in a big family, small family, siblings?
I grew up in a cult.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So a pretty big family.
I don't want
Yeah.
people to just bask in their pain. I want people
Right.
to
Yeah.
see the arc of getting through it and the other side, that
Yeah.
in spite of where you are, there's something that can come of it. And a warrior spirit provides a platform for independent voices, professionals, and thought leaders to share their insights, experiences, and perspectives. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Praxis 33 or its affiliates. Content shared within this program is intended for informational, educational, and inspirational purposes only. While the host and some guests may be professionals or subject matter experts, the information presented is general in nature and should not replace personalized advice from qualified professionals regarding your individual circumstances. By viewing this program, you acknowledge that any decisions or actions taken based on the content are your own responsibility.
I've walked through fire with shadows on my heels. Scars turned to stories that taught me to feel. Lost in the silence, found in the flame. Now wear my battle cry without shame. This isn't the end, it's where I begin. A soul that remembers the fire within.
Welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, brought to you by Praxis 33. I'm your host, Daryl Snow. Let's dive in. One of the things I really enjoy about doing A Warrior Spirit is that I get to meet some really, really cool individuals. And today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to a man that I've met through some mutual friends, but he's just a great guy. Manny Wolfe is a consultant and a content creator. His company, Speaker Realm, guarantees that speakers who use his program will get on paid stages as well as TEDx. But beyond that, Manny's a thought leader who tends to ask the deeper questions in order to have more meaningful conversations. And Manny, I appreciate you and welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's good to be here.
I know you're hailing us from California today. Is
Yeah.
is that where you grew up, or where was little Manny running around?
I'm a true California boy, born and raised, been here all my life. Yeah. So true OG.
True OG, which they're kind of like Arizonans. They're unicorns, hard to find. Everyone
Right.
usually moves in or moves out. What part of the Golden State did you grow up in?
I was actually born in San Francisco.
Oh,
Yeah.
49er.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was born in San Francisco and then moved all around the Central Valley up to Central Valley and Northern California is sort of this unclear boundary as to where one starts and the other stops. So I always just consider myself Northern Californian, but some people who are fussy will say the Bay Area is central. I don't know,
Okay.
whatever. And
And
now I'm in Southern California.
yeah, did you grow up in a big family, small family, siblings?
I grew up in a cult.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So a pretty big family.
That tends to be a huge family. Now, it's funny because a friend of mine and someone that I've known for a little over a year, she actually was raised in a cult as well. She was born into it, and her family actually gave her over to the leader of the cult when she turned 18. So, were you born into it, or did your family, when you were younger, move into it?
I was born into it. I was actually the first kid born into it, and yeah, I guess my mom had moved there with my dad about a year and a half before I came along, and then of course my mom kicked my dad to the curb, And so, born into that cult, and didn't have a lot of experience or time with my father until much, much later.
And how old were you when you were no longer a member of the cult?
Yeah, that's it. So there are two different, broadly speaking, there are two different types of cults. Uh, Now, some people will say religious and non-religious, and some people will say like sex cults and non-sex cults. But really, it's more like if they're militantly structured, super tight structure, or if they're sort of more loose structure. And ours was more loose structure. So it wasn't a thing where, like in the movies, leaving a cult is this big process where the people come in the van and they're dressed in dark clothes and they kidnap you away from the cult and they have to reprogram you. Ours was much more sort of loosey goosey than that. And so I left. I suppose technically I left the cult when I left home, which was about 17. And then I came back home, and I didn't even know it was a cult until, gosh, I was probably about 41 when I learned it was a cult. I always just called us a commune, and it's funny to look back on it because I had a lot of those earmarks of like you might call it like Stockholm syndrome, right? I didn't
Yeah.
I didn't realize how damaging the environment was until I went through a real sort of really gritty process of learning about why I kept doing all these same crazy things over and over again. In spite of seeing that they were crazy and in spite of not wanting to do those kind of things and live that way anymore. And so through that process of trying to figure out why I kept having these sort of like automatic behaviors that were clearly self-destructive, one of the things I learned was that the environment I grew up in was a cult. That actually was really helpful to put a lot of things into perspective, because prior to that, I was kind of just like going through life going, boy, there must be something wrong with me.
Well,
I mean, I had this great childhood, which I didn't. And so why am I still such a lunatic? And,
yeah,
it
and
took
I chuckle at that
context.
because the other girl that I talked to, like, it was the van with the people coming to collect you on her exit. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
she really
Hmm.
feared for her safety for a very long period of time. And when you have this aha moment, because people don't know what they don't know. Like, I grew up
Right.
in a very
Yeah.
abusive household. My mom was very abusive. But you think everybody grows up that way.
Right.
So
That's
you go, well, shit, everyone doesn't get beat with a bullwhip.
right.
Like, that just isn't the norm. So when you have this aha moment of, oh crap, that wasn't really a normal childhood, and it shaped my abnormal 20s and my abnormal 30s, because you
Yeah.
said you were 40. How does that affect you at 40 going, wait a minute, that wasn't normal? Like, what does that epiphany do for you?
Well, so context really snapped a lot of things into place, right? That I didn't have answers for previously. Um, but it also made me realize there was a lot more going on under the surface with me. So it was kind of like realizing that there was a ton more work to do, while at the same time realizing that um, it's like realizing I was more messed up than I thought, while realizing I wasn't as messed up as I thought. you
Yeah,
know?
and that's a dichotomy
Yeah,
that we all can, like, realize. It's like, man, I'm really screwed up, but based on what I came through, I'm really not that screwed up. It kind of makes sense.
yeah. It was kind of like that. It was, I mean, I had it. It was a strange moment. It was a strange moment. It really was. Um, and I mean, still to this day. So I've figured out that for me, I don't think it's worth, especially not at this stage of my life. I don't think it's worth trying to heal. Now, let me be very specific in what I mean here, especially if anyone's listening to this who is in a healing process. Um, I've done a lot of healing. So that's first and foremost. I don't act out. I don't fly off the handle. I don't do the things I used to do. And just to give you one potent but offhand example of how wound up I was, and how, like, you remember those Evil Knievel motorcycles that you'd wind
Yes.
up? You remember what happens if you wind them up too much?
They
Right?
kind
They
of,
take off from the launcher and they just sort of flip.
yeah, they get about a
Yeah,
foot in front of you and then like,
they just lose it.
they didn't go where they were supposed to. And then you'd flip because they weren't, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great analogy for me as a kid. I was too wound up. I couldn't control myself. I just had all this energy inside me that I now realize was what we would today call trauma. And just to give a quick example, this energy would build up so much that I went through a period where I would sprint through traffic as a child. I would just sprint across the road. And I didn't understand it at the time. I thought it was funny. I thought I was showing off. I thought this, I thought that. But what I realized later is I needed something that was such an adrenaline hit that it would relieve the sort of tightening inside of me. And so I did stuff like that, which is, I don't recommend that as a
No,
rule.
running in traffic is not recommended.
Right.
Duly
Yeah.
noted. The disclaimer on the front that take the advice. Don't run through traffic. Now, did it cause you to act out in ways that got you in trouble with the law?
Yeah.
And
Oh, of
did it?
course. Yeah.
So you were arrested a lot?
I was arrested very few times, especially compared to how many times I was almost arrested and how many times I should have been arrested. I had an uncanny knack for being charming, and like, really, I mean, my friends would look at me after I talked all of us out of getting arrested on two dozen occasions, and they're like, "What the? Like, how do you do that?"
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how I do it. I just do it. But I got caught red-handed doing so many things. Just that there just was no way it was not illegal. I knew all the cops in the neighborhood by name. It was, yeah. So I did a lot of not going to jail when I should have, and then I did some going to jail too.
Did it lead you into the drugs and alcohol aspect? I
No,
know.
it's the other way around. It was the drugs and alcohol that led me into the going to, confronting confronting law enforcement. I would say I still remember the first time I got high. I still remember the first time I drank wine. I drank wine and got a buzz for the first time when I was 10. And I ate something like 25 hashish crackers at
Oh my
a
gosh.
family party.
Oh my god.
Yeah, when I was like 11. And barely crawled back up to my room and sat there as my legs were just spinning like helicopter blades. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And I thought I didn't like it, but then I went right back to it again as soon as I could. So yeah,
Isn't
I
that
had the
weird how we
full,
do that though? Like we
yeah,
know that it's bad for us, but we're
yeah,
so addicted to the dysphoria that we just go back and do it again. And I'm like you. I didn't do. My brother was the drug doer in our house. I just did the alcohol. But I remember looking back so many times where I don't know how I made it home,
yeah,
or, you know, one time I woke up in a ditch physically, not in my car, just
yeah,
in a ditch. Another time I
yep.
woke up in my driveway wondering how my car got in the driveway. And I look back at how many times I should have died or could have killed somebody else in the process. And it's, a true miracle that I survived any of that. And I'm wondering, how long did that process last for you to where you were like, in spite of the high, it's not a good idea anymore?
I got sober at 28. Well, right before 28, like a month before my birthday. And it's funny because at the time I thought, I was like, God, my whole life is gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I've wasted my whole life. So I got sober right before 28, and that was that. It really came down to um, I got to a place where I was I was making plans with one person to hunt down and shoot another person, and it just something snapped inside me. Something just gave way, and I was like, I'm not doing this. I don't know what happens next, but it's not that. And so I told the guy. There's a long story there. Basically, I got out of jail. When I went into jail, I was homeless and I was dealing drugs, and so I had lots of friends, and I had my meager belongings stashed at about three friends' houses, and it was like a total of like five small boxes full of stuff, you know. And I thought that it was a pretty cool life to be able to pop into one friend's house and change clothes, and then pop over to another friend's house and grab whatever, and it was just the ways we can delude ourselves are wild. They're wild. Um, I realize now that that's actually a survival mechanism, but at the time, I just didn't get that there was anything wrong with it. So I go to jail. I get out of jail, and it's late. It's probably 2 a.m, but all my friends are meth heads. It doesn't matter what time it is. I go and knock on one guy's door, and he answers the door, and he looks at me like he saw a ghost. Slams the door in my face. Go to another guy's house, same thing. This happens 3 or 4 times, and now at this point, I'm starting to get really, really frustrated, really angry, and so I don't know if I called them or if I just happened to cross them, um, but I got two big friends of mine. Went to the first guy's house again and knocked on the door, and when he opened it, I kicked it in. I kicked his door in, and me and two big guys came in, and I just said, I need some answers. Somebody needs to tell me what the hell's going on here. So it turned out that even though I was busted on some tiny little possession charge, I made the front page of the paper, and it was like if I had known at that point in my life that you could probably sue a newspaper for that kind of like behavior. They positioned me as this drug kingpin. I'm a skinny little homeless kid, and they positioned me as this drug kingpin that they finally arrested after. It was just this completely fabricated story. Well, the problem was that all of my friends and all of their parents saw it. So it was like everybody saw this thing. And so all my friends assumed I'd be in jail for years. They just, that's what they thought. So when I showed up, being meth heads, everybody thought I had like, it's so funny to look back on it because we were so small time, but you have this way of building up your own self-importance, when you're on drugs. Everybody thought I was like a rat.
Yeah.
And like these guys that are spending, $20 a day on drugs
Yeah.
are somehow like who the DEA are looking for, right?
Yeah, that's who they're spending their time on, the
And,
20
yeah,
ounces. The
right.
the self-importance, I think that crosses over in a lot of our life, regardless of the drugs or not. Sometimes there's a point in our life where we think we're more important to other people than we are, which is why we spend so much time on other people's opinion of us. Like, I'm
Yeah,
so important that your opinion of me matters so much,
right. Yeah, right. Or
you
that
know.
you even have an opinion of me.
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah,
I've learned a long time ago that your opinion of me or what you think of me is none of my business, and what I think is not always right. So I shouldn't like I should be very careful with what I believe, my own thoughts, like
hmm
because there's
yeah.
room for error in there.
Quite a bit of room for error. Um, yeah, I mean, addiction and the kind of trauma that and I hate that word. It's been co-opted. Everything now is trauma. Everything now is the most extreme version of what it could possibly ever be. If we disagree, you're a narcissist and you're gaslighting me. No, we just disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate
like,
labels. Labels,
right.
sometimes, and just because you call me an asshole doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes I am an asshole. I don't need to label it, right?
Right.
Sometimes it is
That's
me,
right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But and so the behavior of addiction and the behavior of people who actually kind of went through real more like textbook trauma is just a more extreme end of the spectrum of stuff we all have to figure out. We all deal with, overinflated self-importance, confusion about, things like your place in your family and how your parents raised you. Those things are endemic. I actually have a theory that, and I don't hate to say it. I just think it's going to be taken wrong. I think trauma is part of the process. I do.
I don't think, I've been dealing with people for 45 years and I still shake my head. And when I got my degree in psychology, one of the things that struck me was 3,000 years later, and we're still asking the same fucking question: what am I doing
Yeah.
here, and what's my purpose?
Yeah.
And in through all of that, I have yet to experience, whether it's something I've read, seen, or experienced in person, I have yet to experience one person who's gotten out of life without something happening to them.
Right. Exactly.
I've never
Exactly.
met someone who goes from 0 to death unscathed
Right.
in any way. La
Yeah.
la 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 la. No.
Well, that was the observation that led me to this idea that I think trauma is part of the human experience. Um, there are some interesting dimensions to that argument because trauma is responsible for great art. Sorry, it is. We never would have had Nirvana without trauma. And in hindsight, what great art that was. Good God. I go back and I listen to that stuff and I'm like, oh, I, I hate to be cliche, but I feel his pain.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like,
But you can see
yeah,
that whether it be in music, comedy,
right.
movies,
Yeah. Yeah.
art, if you Van Gogh, that guy was tormented. Like
There you go. Yeah.
if you go to actually study art
Yeah.
as a form,
Which I did.
it is the good art has some level of sadness and pain through it, and that's what they're carrying,
Absolutely.
through their form. And that's what I said about, this show, Warrior Spirit. It's not about the fight, it's how we rise from it. But what I don't ever want is this show to become trauma porn. I don't want
Yeah.
people to just bask in their pain. I want people
Right.
to
Yeah.
see the arc of getting through it and the other side, that
Yeah.
in spite of where you are, there's something that can come of it. And I may not relate to, like, I had the UN Security General from Iraq on. Okay, well, I'm never going to relate to the UN Security General from Iraq, but I am going to relate to the trauma that he got through or the pain that he went
Yeah.
through in order to create who he is to be there.
That's right.
So your and
That's
I's
right.
pain might be different, and the people who are watching this, their pain might be different, but we can relate to what it took to get through it to
Yeah.
become something better from it.
Right. Right. Yeah. An oversimplified but effective way of thinking of it is trauma gives us something to move away from towards something better.
Yes.
Right. And what are human beings if not life forms that seek better? Like it seems to me that's what we do.
Yes.
Right. I've given a lot of thought to this, by the way.
Yeah. No, you
And
haven't. You sound like someone who's just never, had a moment to think. um, I am going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to come back and we're
Sure.
going to touch on those thoughts because I think they're valuable, and it's why I was thrilled to have you on this show today. So we'll be right back.
We are queens, yeah, let 'em see, ruling the world.
Besitos Beauty, because it's your time to shine. For more information, visit www.besitosbeauty.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we're with Manny Wolfe, and Manny is a consultant and content creator, but in my opinion, he's a deep thinker who elicits great conversation. And we were talking about how trauma and pain affect great art. And I think in today's society, and you might disagree with me, I think good conversation is an art form these days.
I think it's always been an art form.
And I think it's been one we've lost.
I think we appreciate it more when we see it now, because there seems to be, in my more conspiratorial days, I'd call it a concerted effort, but in my less conspiratorial days, I would just call it a trend toward more superficiality. Certainly social media thus far has perpetuated more superficial, surface level interactions. Anonymity during interactions is not necessarily something I think adds more value than it takes. Here's my thing on this stuff, though. The jury is out, because as a species, we are very new to this idea of instant global communication. So I like to think we're in our sort of like our adolescence with it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that mirrors the way a lot of people behave.
Our Beavis and Butthead days.
Yeah, the Beavis and Butthead days. Yeah. Like, there are a lot of people who get this like totally cheap synthetic dopamine kick from being a-holes, and whatever. Like, if that's your high point of your day, when I'm at my most magnanimous, I'll take the hit, just because if that's the high point of your day, you're not a happy person. Yeah. Like, ooh, you really got a burn on me there on a comment on a post on social media. But I think that, then we have the emergence of things like long form podcasts. And then now suddenly it's like, oh, maybe we do still have an appetite for good, meaningful conversation. And so I agree with you that conversation is very, very, it's an art form, and B, I think it's coming back a little, but there was a period there, right? Especially as the idealized social media channels were focusing on shorter and shorter interactions. I think that there was a fair argument to be made that, like, oh, are we losing this? Are we losing this important thing?
Yeah. Well, it bled over. I mean, there's 2 points to that. First off, it's coming back because Netflix just spent billions of dollars to add podcasting to their shows, to which they wouldn't have done if the long form podcast wasn't still coming back and something people were paying attention to. And I think the pandemic kind of swung that, when people had to go back into themselves and couldn't be with other people. So they had to find these longer ways to satisfy their day. But the other part of what you were saying, the 30-second sound bites, the short reels, the clips, that became our news cycle as well. And that's where it kind of got lost, because people refused to go any deeper than that 30 seconds they heard on that soundbite. And that was their sudden opinion. Like, they didn't do their own research. They didn't think for themselves. That was what they got. And, the Stephen Colberts and the John Daly's of the world were not supposed to be our news organizations.
Right. Yeah. Newsflash, guys. Yeah. They're comedians.
And they're paid to satire. That's like saying Saturday Night Live was, yes, it's a reflection of our social society, but they're paid.
But you have to have a certain amount of discernment to understand how and why, even. Right? Yes. You can't abandon discernment. You can't, Colbert's a great example to me, because when he was first starting out, I thought his ironic conservative guy was so genius. It was so like you could tell he cared about it. That's my feeling. Now he feels like a shill for one point of view. He feels like a paid company man. He feels like Jim Henson has his hand up his ass. Yeah. He's making him say whatever.
And I think that's where it goes back to, we believe everything we think. Like, he started believing his own hype, and people do that all the time. Now, you are a consultant and you are paid to help people speak and get on stages. So
Yeah.
how does the kingpin of the Bay Area uh, go from busting out doors to busting out stages? Like
Right. Right.
how does that transition happen?
Well, there's actually a pretty straight line. And so it goes like this. I met my now ex-wife, and I had developed a habit of showing off for girls I was interested in by casually tossing out these god awful stories from my life. And it worked. It was a great way to impress girls. And she just happened to be different than most of the girls I had met. And so rather than being impressed and giggling and, oh my God, you're so brave and all that stuff, which is the response I was used to eliciting, I told her one of these horrible stories and she just stopped cold and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, you have to write a book. You have to write your life story. You have to. And she was just like emotional about it. She wouldn't even let me talk. She's like, no, you have to do this. And I was like, okay. And I literally went home that night and started writing. And so I wrote the Tao of the Unbreakable Man. It's on Amazon for your perusing and pleasure. And then I didn't know what to do with it. I was sort of a man from, my mindset was from the 80s and 90s where I thought you just sent out manuscripts to publishers. And funny story, full circle, it turns out you can do that, but I didn't. So anyway, I realized at that moment in time that wasn't how things were working. And so through some just random, like I went to Penguin's website and I was able to book a 15-minute call with the VP of publishing. It's this weirdest thing. And this guy gets on the call with me and he says, so what's your story? And I tell him, oh, it's a great story. It's a great story. He's like, how big is your audience? And I was like,
My girlfriend, now my ex, 0,
yeah,
me and the man in the mirror.
exactly. So short story is he said, you gotta grow an audience. You got to build an audience. That's how you do it today. And I said, okay, how would I do that? And he said, podcast. So I joined a podcast community. I paid somebody for their podcast training program. I set up a podcast. I launched the podcast, which was meant to be sort of an extension of the stuff in the book. And I deliberately tried to write the book like I kept Jonathan Livingston Seagull symbolically in mind, where I didn't want to spoon feed you lessons. I wanted them to be baked in the stories, and I wanted you to sort of want to have to work to find the lesson. That was what I hoped to achieve with the style of writing. Many people have told me since that I succeeded, which is a beautiful thing, but the podcast was meant to sort of be an extension of that, where I would talk to people and I would find out they're sort of like you, like what were your struggles? What did you go through to get? And what my thinking was at the time was, I want to paint a picture of how, even though our circumstances are different, we're really all the same in this one really important way, which is that while our details are different, the fact that we struggle is universal. So this is this big high-minded thing, right? I put the podcast out there and people start sending me messages going, can you teach me how to sound like you do? It's like, what? But, I saw an opportunity, and it had happened that prior to writing the book, I had studied singing with about 4 different singing coaches. I had done public speaking. I had done acting. So I had these 3 different perspectives from which I could actually teach people how to sound better. So I quickly threw together a program. I took all the complicated stuff that I learned from singing and acting, primarily about voice projection and about, what is and isn't sort of charismatic and attractive. And I put it into this very simple program, and just started going into Facebook groups and saying, thanks for adding me. I'm so glad to be here. I'd like to give everybody who wants it a gift. I'll give you a free vocal training. And that was how I got clients in the beginning. But the thing is that mostly speakers were attracted to this. 90% of the people who signed up for these free trainings were speakers. And they loved it. Some of them went on to ask me for other things. So I developed body language, again, drawing from acting and public speaking, and performance too, musical performance. Like there are definitely things you learn from hundreds of hours of performing on stage about what does and doesn't look good physically. So I put together uh, uh, body language, vocal tonality, and storytelling. And it was perfect because I had just published and released and launched this book. So nobody was going to argue that I didn't know how to tell a story. you know?
Yeah.
And so I get speakers coming through. They'd go through it. They'd love it. It was great. Same question every time. How do I get more bookings? I love your training. I feel so confident. How do I get on stage? And so at a certain point, I just sat down and figured it out.
And the reality is, life trained you for that role. That's how you got out of jail. Sometimes your acting and your tonality ability, like you innately had it, and now you're
Yeah.
able, because you lived through it, able to teach others. There are some elements here that I want to run through real quick with you. This is your guaranteed stage placement now, the speaker realm. This is your current iteration of your program. And talk a little bit about this for a minute.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to know is that technically it's not a program. Technically it's a service that you can turn over to us. We'll do all the work. One of the things that I sort of arrived at from spending enough time in this intersection of coaching, marketing, and speaking is that everybody has a training program for you. And even the best ones, and I'm friends with some of the guys and girls who have the best ones, they have terribly low completion rates. And I realized that they're low because people don't want to do the work they don't want to do. It's just human nature. And so what we do wherever possible is we do the work for you. Specifically when it comes to pitching you to events, pitching you to conferences, pitching you to corporate, um, you know, getting you into the conversations with the people who will hire you. We don't show you our process. We don't show you our system. We don't teach you our blueprint. We just do the work for you. We do it all for you, full stop. So that's really what you see there. I like your selections. You pick some ones that I really like.
I'll show you a few more here in a minute, but you really are the lazy man's pathway to these events, because a lot of people, and look, I'm no different. A lot of people, we have our speeches, we have our talks, we have the things that we can impact people with. What we don't have is the skill set necessarily, or the drive necessarily, to do the legwork to show others that we have that. Like we can pitch them, and we know that we can impact for them, but rarely do we want to do the work to make those phone calls and spend our day getting on those stages and doing all that.
If I could do my little hot take on that, which is half sales pitch, half sort of like insight, it would be this: the kind of person that feels called to speak on stage is antithetic to the kind of person that likes to sit down and do fussy little detail work, repetitive tasks. I finally figured that out. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just not who we are.
Yeah.
We don't like that kind of stuff.
And the solopreneurs like me, we have to become good at those. So part of our day we hate it, and part of the day we love it because we're actually getting to do what we have to do. So I think what you do is bring value to a lot of those people. But in your process, you also you have the one sheet, which is a very important role for speakers to to do that legwork if they need to or want to. So that's vital. But one of the things that and you're a very private person online as far as your life goes. So a lot of what is seen is delved around the business and some of your. I called you a thought leader because you ask provoking questions to get conversations started. But what I like also about you you've embraced AI, and not many of us have done that yet. But you've done it pretty well. Like I love. I'm going to run through a few of your AI photos here with the jet, and
Yeah.
the play off of your name with the wolf. But then the fact that you can get AI to give you the right number of fingers and toes in and of itself is a great concept because
Yeah.
not all
No
of us
small
can.
feet, right?
No small feat at all, pun intended. But
Right.
sitting here pensively looking in front of the clock, then I love this one with the briefcase with the high executive office with the wolf lettering behind you. Then we have you in your pensive state with your hands folded, and again with the wolves, and then my favorite with Godzilla and the car. Like, how does
And
your
my and
brain?
an a,
Go ahead.
I was going to say an AI avatar of my girlfriend.
I was going to ask, is she the real deal in your life, or is she
She
also the?
she's the real deal. Yeah.
And she
She
looks
looks a
that
little
good,
less
huh?
like Penelope Cruz. She looks that good, but she looks a little less like Penelope Cruz. And uh, if I who does she looks like someone famous, and I still struggle to pinpoint it, but not quite as Penelope Cruz as that. In
And I'll have to say, you do not look like Godzilla, and Lord knows, you said you're a skinny guy. That's a buff version of Godzilla right there. So, uh,
yeah,
so how do you embrace AI so well? Because you use it effectively in your marketing, and you use it effectively to get conversations started. So, how do you do
yeah.
that?
So philosophically, I don't want to put anything out that feels like more schlock for schlock's sake, right? So there's a discernment about, okay, what am I trying to say? And I think that's always been a question underneath everything I do all the time is, what am I actually trying to say? That may be a subject for another conversation because it's a deep one. Um, I'm currently writing a trilogy, and it's fiction, but I don't ever want it to feel throwaway or light. So every time I write a scene, it's like, okay, what am I trying to say underneath this? Again, another conversation perhaps. So with the AI images, what I want to do is, most of the time they need to be the image equivalent of like writing a scene that has a deeper metaphorical layer to it rather than just a one-dimensional superficial thing. So with the office images, it's just constantly projecting and reinforcing um, an image of high standards, right? An image of quality, an image of um, uh, exclusivity, I suppose.
Success.
And yeah, and success, right? So one of the things that you learn if you study marketing and advertising, which I did, I was fortunate to actually study it underneath the retired VP of marketing for Tower Records, and he was brilliant. He was a genius when it came to this stuff. He was like Don Draper level. And one of the things he talked about a lot was repetition. Why are logos important? Why does a brand matter? Right? What is a brand if somebody doesn't see it all the time? So I know that if I keep putting the same sort of emotional tone out there with the images, that it'll have an effect. And so that's a lot of what drives the choices I make. Sometimes I like it to be more lighthearted, sometimes it's more serious. But even the Godzilla of me and my girlfriend, like I drive that car. That's the car I drive. Mine is white, but it's the same car.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan of Volvos. Um, and I'm a huge fan of Godzilla because I'm a nerd. And
I've seen
so
that.
that image was
I've seen that theme in your work, Godzilla.
right.
So how does a kid from the Bay Area doing drugs, getting in trouble with the law, How does he get to the point where he's now a successful content creator, entrepreneur, speaker? You're kind of a speaker agent, even if that's not the label, but it gives the idea of what you do.
Yeah.
How does a person go from that to this?
Oh, it's easy. You just buy my course. No, just kidding.
No. Bypass the drugs. No, but
Yeah.
how did you go from that life to this life? Because you're living a pretty good life now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, by any reasonable standard, I am. Uh, it's hard to say it in some sort of cut and dry way. There were some things that I attribute my ability to go from there to here to. One of them was at the moment that I got sober, I took sobriety very seriously, very seriously. A lot of people, I say that because a lot of people who come into sobriety programs sort of, they say things like, oh, I'm just stuck on this God part, or I'm just stuck on this, or I'm just stuck on that. And I was like, I don't care what I have to do. I just got done finding a way to not hunt down and shoot someone. I don't care what I have to do to stay out of that life. Right. And so that was like, I really came at it with aggression. And I believe that's important. Maybe not aggression, but full commitment. So then I started to like learn the spiritual tools of the AA community. And I gotta say, I'm not here to plug AA, but those are profound, man. They are profound. And so even as I got to the point where I felt like I didn't have a lot in common with the community anymore, I felt like I had more digging to do, right? To me, it seemed like most of the people in the community sort of hit a level. They're okay there. They stopped kind of searching. They stopped seeking, whatever, no judgment. I knew I had more shit to uncover. So that'd be another thing is I went aggressively again after understanding how I could have been so unhinged when I was younger. And we didn't even talk about the violence. We didn't even talk about the crime. Trust me, it was there. And we didn't even talk about the way that I treated women before I got sober. And that was a big one for me. The day I got sober, the first thing I wanted to figure out was, why do I treat women like this? This isn't even how I want to treat them. So there were these things that my experience in the sort of official framework of the 12 steps weren't addressing, not at my speed that I wanted it. So I went, metaphorically, I went out into the desert alone. And I did it for a long time. I mean, years. My journey from there to here was gruesome, it was brutal, it was lonely, it was dark, and it was just a test of will you fall or will you keep going? And I can't stress that enough. Like, so maybe that's it, right? To get from something like that to something like this, above all else, you must have the ability to get back up again. You must. And I mean, I figured out a long time ago, before the term psychologically unemployable was trendy, I think I was psychologically unemployable. I had to figure out how to make a living on my own terms. And now it's one of those things where I'd actually like to say, if you look at me now, it's like one thing, but what it took to get here was something that I don't think a lot of people have. I just don't think they have it in them, and that's why I
Everybody wants
never,
the
ever,
results.
right.
They don't want to go through the process.
Yeah. And that's why I never have anything bad to say about people who want to do the 9 to 5. I used to, right? Like a lot of entrepreneurs, like we think we're so much better. No, I don't think that's it. If your risk threshold is within what I would call normal constraints, I'm not judging you. My risk threshold is apparently through the roof. It takes a lot of ability to get punched in the face. It really does. And just keep coming. I mean, I hope that's a suitable answer.
Well, it's your answer, and it's the answer that got you to where you are. But I think
Yeah.
it's, in my experience, it's universal. We haven't touched on it, and I would love to be able to have you back for a second deeper one because this time does go by fast. But I
Yeah,
think
I'd love
people who've
to.
gone through what you and I have gone through, or what many people have gone through, have either had
Hmm.
suicidal thoughts or suicidal attempts. And
Yep.
stepping back from the ledge and bringing ourselves back to this side of the lifeline is an internal thrust that says, you know what, this may
Yeah.
seem like the way out, but this is a temporary solution to a permanent problem, or a permanent solution to a temporary problem, I
Right.
should say. And
Solution to a
so,
temporary problem. Yeah.
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 So, you have to be able to find something in you that gets you back up. Now, for me, it was my connection to God and my, my faith. Um, was
Hmm.
that similar for you?
Yes. And I do think this comes from, I'll just say God with a capital G. I am not a practicing Christian. Not that that even matters, I feel. But see, there's one thing that I've had, even through the hardest parts, is I've been able to see just the heartbreaking, tragic beauty of life. I it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful, and I don't want to leave it not a second before I have to.
Yeah, there's an old country song. Everyone wants to go to heaven, just not today. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
but I mean, just simple things like being kind to a stranger. And again, I'm not being glib here. This is the kind of stuff that has pulled me through the darkest moments of my life. Feeling the breeze, like there's so much beauty here, and thank God I was given eyes to see it, because I do. I see it everywhere, and and I suppose there's part of me that is and always will be an artist, And when I see that kind of thing, it's like I feel some days like I'm the physical center of humanity, and other days I feel like I'm nowhere, even like it's not even part of me,
mhm.
but I can always see the beauty.
I think that's why I love nature so much, whether it be mountains, ocean, sky,
Hmm.
whatever. And
Yeah.
I had the fortune to drive from coast to coast when I was in my early 20s, before
Hmm.
cell phones, and when you had to have a Rand McNally map, no,
Yeah, I remember.
none of that crap. But there's so much beauty everywhere you look. And if you just look for it, you find something to find joy in. You just, some days you got to look a little harder, but
Yeah, yeah,
if you look,
yeah,
it's there.
yeah.
So, what do you want
I,
your
I
legacy to
mean,
be, Manny?
yeah, I think about that a lot actually. Um, at this point in my life, more than anything else, I want to be able to make a literary contribution to. I would like to be part of America's contribution to the literary canon of the world. And so I've written, my memoir. I am almost finished with, I guess you could call it like the highly dubious autobiography of my father's life, or biography of my father's life, because I didn't know him very well. And then I'm working on a trilogy now called, the first one is Apocalypse Inc., the second one is Outland, and the third one is Opus. And it is really meant to be a fictional gonzo, over the top, assholes over elbows telling of this moment in time and how crazy everything has been, and offering some hope, of course, but really taking on everything that we've lived through as a species in the last 10 years. And I do it partly because I need to make sense of it all, and I realize that all the things that have happened are too big to sort of like cleanly articulate. And so what I've found is that, and I've never written fiction before this, but using fiction to like using lies to tell the truth has been super therapeutic for me. It's helped me clarify my thoughts, organize things, and really get to the heart of some of the stuff about humanity that we're all sort of seeing, whether we acknowledge it or not. And right now, humanity is kind of caught with its pants down a little bit.
Yeah, we're still trying to decide if we want to remain human.
Yeah, but that's only one of many pieces, right? We're seeing systems being revealed, like institutions failing, all this crazy stuff, and I tried so hard to like articulate it in clean, short, concise sort of messages, and I couldn't do it. And then one day, I got in the habit of writing little poems to my girlfriend every day, and one day it just came out. It's like poem started with, she said her name was, and I'm quoting her here, Tipsy Sober. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? And I kid you not, from there, this whole book spilled out of me. I wrote an entire book in 4 months,
Nice.
246 pages, and now I'm on the second one. So I sort of like took me 50 something years to realize that creatively, I think I'm a writer above all else.
But that to me is someone who is cathartically healing through their art process.
Absolutely, man. No doubt about it. There is so much, like, there's catharsis. There's this feeling that this is the highest, cleanest, most sophisticated expression of my creativity ever in my life. Like nothing else even comes close. There's this feeling like I finally found the medium, and I've been looking for it all my life. Music, art, speaking, acting, and it turns out that writing satisfies everything, and it's effortless compared to the others. So that's
awesome.
what I want, man.
So the last question I'm going to ask you, and I would love to have you back on for a second because this time flew way too much, but it's a question I ask all my guests. What does a warrior spirit mean to Manny Wolfe?
I think a warrior spirit is, it's an, well, there's a lot of pieces to it. Like, I consider myself to be a warrior in a very real way, which is that I am capable of tremendous destruction, and I have it under wraps. I trained in martial arts. I've been in hundreds of fist fights. So I feel like I'm, at least legitimately an ex-warrior. I'm much older now. I got a bad knee, so I wouldn't be able to do what I used to do. But I think a real warrior versus a fighter, there's a deeper spiritual side to it. And there's something about an unrelenting need for truth, right? Need for congruency, need for alignment, need for deeper awareness. I think those things, in a way that doesn't necessarily run the risk of getting punched in the face, are as hard to pursue as physical courage is. So, like, to me, yeah, I'd say a warrior's spirit is the subset of humanity that keeps us moving. I really do think that. I've noticed that it's a very small group, small percentage of humanity that keeps us moving forward into what I think is going to be really, frankly, a glorious destiny. And it's the warriors that do it.
I look forward to walking that path with you as a fellow warrior. So I want to thank you for your time. We will have some of that book information in your other thing because I wasn't able to pull it from where I was looking, but we'll have it in the show notes. But I just appreciate you and thank you for joining me.
It's been a pleasure.
And if you'd like to get in touch with Manny, you can do so on his Facebook page or his Facebook group. And as always, thank you for joining us on this edition of A Warrior Spirit. We're now on all the major platforms, as well as on Roku via the Prospera TV app and at breakthroughradio.net. So be sure to like or subscribe to catch all the episodes. As always, the journey is sacred, the warrior is you. So remember to be inspired, be empowered, and embrace the spirit of the warrior within.
It's not just about the fight. It's how we rise from it. This is your Prospera.